it just dawned on me, even though I've known it forever, that Reb and I both had in common throughout our career and also into this part of Rise is that in our career, we were very connected to our mind and our body, but it was not cool at the time. Like that wasn't something to talk about, or it wasn't something that you just bring up casually, right? It's always either technique or positive thinking, right? Like it's one or the other that we were focused on. And again, this has evolved. Like there's nothing wrong with this. It's just how the world has evolved in sport.
Welcome to the Rise and Shine podcast. My name is Nat Ambrosi and I'm your host. Today, I have the pleasure to sit down with Rebecca Soni and Caroline Burkle, both co-founders of Rise. Rise is mind power coaching. It's being able to improve your confidence and skills both in your sport and outside your sport. This conversation is so unique because it's the untold stories of how Rise began. So I'm so excited to jump right in. And at first, let's introduce both Rebecca and Caroline.
I am Rebecca Soni, excited to be on here with you, Nat, and talking about Rise. I am currently based in Bend, Oregon, but grew up swimming in New Jersey and then Southern California for college, and where I finished my athletic career out in the California area. And two-time Olympian, six-time medalist, 3 gold, 3 silver in swimming. And really excited to dive into some of the other stuff, that, what happened afterwards and why we are all here today with Rise. But I'll throw it over to Caroline to introduce herself.
Awesome. So Rebecca and I actually have known each other very, very long time, since we were young kids, I would say, about in our early teens, but we didn't really know each other until we were on the same teams together later in life. But anyways, segueing into it, I'm Caroline Burkle. I was on the same team as Rebecca in 2008 and swam the 4x200 freestyle relay, and we got bronze. And yeah, I went to the University of Florida and studied sociology and psychology, and then got my master's in sports psychology, and teamed up with Reb when we started to figure out there's got to be a bit more to sport than what we're seeing here. And just tapping into that has been quite the journey and really rewarding. So excited to be here as well.
Thank you both. I kind of want to jump in a little bit to kind of your time in sport, and a little bit about the mindset coaching that you received.
Yeah, interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of the mindset coaching or development of minds as a teenager into my college career was very much done under the table, if you will. Like it wasn't something that we're like, we're going to talk about mindset today. But, you know, for example, we did things like breathwork workshops. Mike DeBoer, my club coach, would do breathwork workshops and visualization workshops with this one guy who was really big at the time. And he did these recordings, and he would put them on, and we'd all be in a room and we'd visualize and get to go through that. But we didn't understand why, right? And that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the development of the times and the evolution of where we are now. The focus is more on that. And we've all been able to tap into that a bit more. But that was one example of high school. And I think in college, it became a bit more personal, where I would have conversations that were about how am I really doing with my academic advisor, for example, or one of the assistant coaches that I trusted, and she was incredible. And we were able to really talk about what am I really feeling inside, and how can I make that better as I go on through my 4 years here at university. So again, it wasn't really talked about in a sense of this is the program of mindset development, this is what we're doing, but more just under the table, developing it slowly, but not really understanding why. I think that's the biggest difference between then and now, is that why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that why piece behind it. And you were developing your mind in all of these different areas with all of these different people, but, you know, finding out exactly how you can do it and the naming behind it, I think is so important. Reb, do you want to share a little bit about your story with mindset growing up?
Yeah, I had a bit more under the table in terms of I wasn't really aware of this component, yet all that I was doing in hindsight was really about strengthening the mindset and making it more resilient. And as I retired and went through the transition process of just trying to make sense of what happened, like, why was I even able to win a gold medal? Like, I'm not that tall relative to the other swimmers. I'm not that strong. Like, I look at, my strength versus others, and these physical elements were not it. And so it was in this reflection that it was more the mentality that I started to open my mind to the possibility here. But backtracking to what was present, I was a very observant introvert. So I love observing people. I love, just seeing what's happening. And I remember just soaking it in, even as a young kid. It started with watching my older sister, who was just so good in training every single day, so tough, so resilient. Like, so if you asked me, I would have thought she was the best swimmer ever, and yet couldn't, put it together for race time. There was a misalignment there. And I was watching this, and watching her emotions involved, and thinking like, oh, getting all emotional about, being upset about races, it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything. What does it do? And just getting really observant about these things. And I feel like I was maybe naturally inclined to, whether it was in being more observant and receptive to working and playing with these things. So later on, I remember in my college time, I don't remember why or how this happened, but I started to think, okay, I'm a breaststroker. I do open turns instead of flip turns. And so that's very similar to how you turn with a kickboard. So I thought every single kick set, I'm going to mentally kind of imagine I'm doing a race open turn in my 200 breaststroke, and I'm going to like put power into it and put words like strength and you got this, and, just kind of building this automatic connector to open turns every single kick set, every single day. And I don't know why. Maybe I was just bored. Maybe I needed something to entertain myself, but it was amazing when then at race time, I didn't have to think that. And as soon as I did my turn, those words came right back. It was like strength, power, off the wall, you got it, And so there was this like training that came in, but I wasn't really all that aware that it was happening, or that it would be called mental training or anything like that. I know we all think, oh, we have to be mentally tough. And in swimming, there's stuff and relates to how well can you, and they're pushed through pain. And so it's like, it's not necessarily the same thing to be mentally strong and to push through pain. And so it was interesting kind of just juggling that, and mainly in that reflective hindsight, and looking at, well, what was I doing and what did make me a better athlete, and noticing things, starting to understand that behind the blocks, I knew that I had confidence and strength, and like, I didn't matter if they beat me yesterday or anything like that. There was something mentally that I could always rely on. So it was more this trial and error on my part that was kind of fun to explore into.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you talked about, seeing your sister, and she was so mentally tough in practice. And then when it came to races, I think I relate a lot to that. It's like my mindset for practice was there because there wasn't that competitive piece. But once it came to races, it was like, I can't put it all together. And the fact that you just like internally were able to say like, hey, like I'm going to do this as I push off the wall in a kick set. So I kind of want to jump in. Both of you are talking a lot about the word mindset. And before we talk about kind of how Rise got started, if you could share a little bit about what the word, if you were to take the word mindset and put it in one sentence or two sentences, what would it be?
No, I'm on the hot seat for this one. These types of questions always give me anxiety in the moment, which is so funny. We're talking about that during this podcast, but because I want to, I don't want to define it as one thing for everyone, but I want to be able to give like an umbrella feeling of what it is. Because I think I'm just very tuned into, like, it may not fit for everyone. Like everyone has a different version of what mindset is. So for me personally, and what I've seen with my athletes, mindset is feeling confident in yourself and understanding yourself to understand your strengths, your areas of improvement, and how you can utilize those both to become a more confident human being first. And that's in the realm of what we do. And I'm just sort of talking about in the realm of what we do. I think an overall mindset in life will vary. And I think the thing that I focus on is being able to hold multiple feelings, emotions at once so that you can accept yourself for where you are. So that's more of the general broad life term. But in terms of what we talk about, it really is, in sports specifically, it's embracing yourself and all of your strengths, your weaknesses, and understanding how you can utilize those both in order to become a more confident athlete and human being.
Yeah, it is so hard to put into one sentence, and certainly not possible. There's so many components and elements of it, but I'll take it back to, in addition to what, Caroline was talking about, I'll take it back to very early on in Rise, when the way that I started to get into this was that we have this powerful machine of a body, and it also has a brain and a mind. So I would kind of played with this metaphor of we need a user manual for this thing that we're operating. And so many times, whether it's our brain or our physical body that goes haywire, or we get nervous, or performance anxiety or stress, or it's doing all this stuff. And so it's when we talk about mindset development specifically, I like to think of it as creating and reading your own user manual for how to, live in this body and perform optimally in this body. It certainly started with a lot of focus on that really mental element for me, because, there are so many times when the words that you're saying in your mind and the thoughts that you're having have a really deep impact on the outcome. And I never saw it that way as a kid. I mean, I was starting to learn and develop it, but nobody told me that. And so there's so much power that comes from creating that user manual and having it at reference. Like, ooh, I just got really tight and tense, and what do I do with that? Rather than, I feel like we're really disconnected from that in general athletic training. If anything, we're taught to push through that instead of working with it. For me personally, I've learned so much about how mindset connects in with body from Caroline. And that has been a growing and developing practice in my life through this whole process, as well as really seeing how that can also deeply, deeply impact athletic performance, and how amazing if we can, add that to the user manual even further. So those were the main components, brain user manual, and also body connection. How do we operate as a whole creature?
Yes, the mind-body connection. I love, and I've learned a lot from Caro as well with mind-body connection. I think that's so important. And one thing that you both touched on, that it was kind of a trick question, but not, because, mindset, it could be named in so many ways, but the individualistic piece of what mindset is. And, the beginning of Rise, from my understanding, started as one-on-one coaching. And it was just the people who you all were connected with, whether it be through swim coaching or that were in your communities. So I want to jump into that. How did Rise start? What was kind of the initial piece of that? And Reb, I'll kick it off to you.
Yeah, it's been 7 years now, or are we hitting our 7th or 8th year anniversary? I'm not sure, but it's been a long time, 7th year. And it ultimately started at a time when both of us were separately on our journeys of retiring from sport, figuring out what's next, and really being pulled into this world of not only mindset, but, physical and somatic, and, just learning how to optimize ourselves as humans outside of the water. I know for me, it was a time of deep contemplation around trying to make sense of what happened. Like I mentioned earlier, trying to understand and comprehend why, a small town kid with the same training as everybody else, was able to do this. It just didn't align. And sometimes when we take a step back, it just was whoa, the perspective, I can't make sense of this. And I really was sitting with that a lot. And I was getting into nutrition and Pilates and all these different components. And one of the things that I started to learn and research was positive psychology. So I took a year-long course in positive psychology, and it was a really fantastic deep dive into this little known, fairly new field of psychology that doesn't focus on what's wrong and, labeling issues, but rather focuses on what's going well and learning from those that have done, built and created whatever well. And so I thought that was really fascinating. And as I got deeper into learning more about this field, I started to really recognize that there's so much space for something like this within the athletic community. There's so much space for not looking at my stroke and analyzing what am I doing wrong, but rather what am I doing right. And that really, really resonated with me as a swimmer, especially, I was a breaststroker. And when I was a kid, like I didn't do it how other people did it. So much so that the officials were disqualifying me and couldn't tell me why. It just looks weird. Like, what's wrong with it? Nothing. I don't know. It just looks weird. So it like really clicked of like, find what works for you and really focus on that. We're really good as humans at identifying our weaknesses, but not necessarily building our strengths even further and really leaning on those. So positive psych really clicked with me. And in the process of this course, completed with a final project after a year. And at the same time, I was doing swim clinics and swim lessons and, kind of traveling around, visiting swim teams and really starting to, recognize a little bit of a disconnect there as an athlete that, yes, I was a great athlete, but I'm not a good coach. I'm not a good swim coach. I don't see what a swim coach would see when they're looking at a kid in the pool. I don't even see what my coach sees when I look at my video. So I realized that was not my strength, but instead I was gravitating towards these conversations with athletes about their mindset, about how they're feeling, about what's going on underneath the surface. And through that, started to make these connections and offered, hey, instead of doing a swim lesson, let's hop on, it was Skype at the time, and connect. I was traveling around, so this gave me the opportunity to let's connect when we're back home, and we can just do it online, and we don't have to be at a pool to talk about this. And also, this to me is so much more important than how you move your fingers in the water when you're swimming. There's other people that can do that really well, and I can't. And so it was a really beautiful process for me identifying, this is what I'm interested in, and this is what I'm skilled at, having a conversation about and getting into with these athletes. And over time started to see this is actually making a really big difference for not only these kids, but also for me in my process, in my story of coming out of the sport and being able to give some of this back. And so I was just playing with this and didn't have any concept or form for it. And of course, Caroline and I were in communication about our own personal journeys and stories and learnings and getting into, hey, have you seen this cool new thing? And let's try this. And we were across the country at the time. So we were just, sending voice memos back and forth. And eventually it just started to seem really clear that we should probably do this together. But I'll throw this part of the story over to Caroline so she could tell it from her perspective.
Well, I want to say that the interesting thing that it just dawned on me, even though I've known it forever, that Reb and I both had in common throughout our career and also into this part of Rise, is that in our career, we were very connected to our mind and our body, but it was not cool at the time. Like, that wasn't something to talk about, or it wasn't something that you just bring up casually, right? It's always either a technique or positive thinking, right? Like, it's one or the other that we were focused on. And again, this has evolved. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just how the world has evolved in sport. And I have vivid memories of, like what she just said, is, I retired before she did, and we would be voice memoing back and forth. And we would talk about, what she was doing with her Pilates and nutrition and getting into that side of the body. And then what I was doing, which was I was in fashion school and designing things for the body, which was sketching the body and like discussing how people feel in things and like the way that your body feels. And it's so interesting how those two things don't necessarily have to do anything with Rise right now, but it was our way of somehow finding connection to the body in our own specific way. And we were yearning for that as athletes. Like, you just want to find that connection and feel yourself succeed as a physical being as it ties into your mind. So I think there's just so many different ways. There's a famous quote in the book Eastern Body, Western Mind, about the power of doing things for the body, whether it's through nutrition or through sketching the body or through like physical certifications, that we do try and keep in touch with ourselves in that way. So it's interesting to me that that is how we began this journey, just by talking and doing those things for ourselves. And then we merged together. One gloomy day in Knoxville, I get a phone call from Rebecca, and it was rare we talked on the phone because we were voice memo queens. And I was standing in the parking lot and I was just about to graduate. And she was just like, telling me what she had created and what was going for her with, hey, I'm just talking to these kids and I have somebody that you could work with if you want to. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Let's do this. This is awesome. And then another couple of days goes by and we get another phone call with each other, and I'm in the parking lot again. And I have these vivid memories of this imagery. And, she said, let's make this a thing. Like, this is incredible. Let's do this. So in that specific place, in that specific time, we began Rise. And this was back when Skype was a thing. And this is back when we, barely knew how to track things very well. And we were just kind of winging it. We brought on Christy Kowal like immediately, and she started working with a couple athletes herself. So it does just work with connection, or we worked with connection as a way to begin a business, like connection with ourselves, connection with our bodies, connection with, okay, now we see the missing piece is how do we connect these two things? We've done the greats of each area, and now we need to bring them together. So I thought that was a really cool coincidence that we both wanted that, and we both were studying that as well, which was interesting. So yeah, that's how it began. And then I moved out to Santa Barbara, and I remember that's when things started to pick up, and we were working with more coaches and mentors at the time. So yeah, it's just been, as any business goes, you start one place, you pivot here, you pivot until you find what things that work. And that's, the way that it goes. But I will say that I do consider us in many ways like pioneers of this space of being able to work with that age group of athletes on what's important. And we created pretty much the first program that would give from athletes of our caliber to the next generation in that way. That is a mass unit of a program. So it's pretty cool to think about.
I think a big passion of ours as well at the time, it was just so much was unfolding at the same time, where we not only were building and developing ourselves, like Caroline said, and this opportunity to work with these youths in a totally new way. And it was really fascinating to watch these kids step up into it. But a third and kind of really big part of this that still holds a lot of passion for us was this opportunity to, offer something else as a retired professional athlete. So creating this community or this team of our peers and our friends and people that we saw were, like what Caroline and I had with the voice memos back and forth, this support system where we not only, hold each other and support each other through this transition process, because those conversations were pivotal. Those are life-changing for me. I know that for a fact. I would not be, the same person that I am now in my trajectory if we hadn't had those conversations. And so we wanted more people to be part of that conversation, and also, provide an opportunity that not only helps athletes with, paying the bills and getting by and like finding a new way of being financially in the world and getting paid for your time and value, but also, creating a space that actually consciously talks about personal and self-development beyond athletic, because we were the generation that was, it's all body, it's go, it's force, it's try harder, and like you got to undo that a little bit. You got to unpack that a bit if we're going to succeed in, as holistic humans and not just take that mentality to the next thing. And so, because it didn't make sense out in the real world. I mean, there is a lot of, you'll get a lot done, but I was finding myself just like hitting a wall mentally and whatnot. So that community part of it was super powerful for us, as well as a driving factor and a really beautiful way that it positively impacts professional athletes. Retiring hugely impacts youth athletes, and ultimately led to this, what it is today, where our goal is massive goal of, really foundational change in the way that youth athletics is built and structured. Both, when kids are coming in, build them up a little bit, give them the tools and resources so they don't crash, in their teens, and also giving tools for the end of your sport career and how to, facilitate that and then come and give back. It's a full circle, really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that part about community. I think with coaching youth athletes, it's so important, but it also is, it's like, if you do, like, there's an application process to become a mind power coach, but if you do become a mind power coach, you have all of those people from all different sports too. So I think one thing in this conversation, we've talked a lot about swimming because it's all of our backgrounds, right? We've all been swimmers, but at Rise, it's really cool because there's basketball players and there's soccer players and there's gymnasts, like all different sports. And every single sport, I was just having a conversation with one of our soccer players who's a mind power coach. And he was talking about how in a team sport like soccer, you have everyone around you to build you up. Whereas an individual sport like swimming, it's you and, the clock, and you got to go for it. So I think that that's one unique thing about Rise. And you all are, both of you, all of our mind power coaches are the pioneers in this change. And the more and more people that learn about it, the more and more that they can see just how important it is. So we're slowly coming up on time. I feel like we can talk forever. But I kind of want to fast forward and just have you both kind of give an update of what does Rise look like now? So you started off, you were coaching a few different athletes. What does it look like now? How has that growth and changed over the past 7 years?
We tried to do the whole structured business plan in the beginning, and ultimately it ended up pivoting a lot, which it always does. But at this point, we are so excited to have a team of 35 mind power coaches working with us from many different sports, as well as over 200 kids that have come through the program so far. And there are other ways that Rise connects and gives opportunities for people to learn about these tools, and whether it's our newsletter and social media. And so there's other venues in which Rise is putting great content out there that's boosting your mind and your mind power. But having that number of kids that have really spending this intentional time week after week, it's not a quick fix. We're learning that it's not about just a one-time thing. There's no cure-all for this. This is a process and a perspective of life that you're building that's making you resilient, that's making you learn how to tackle anything that comes your way, whatever it may be, a physical challenge, sport, or just how you're feeling and working with that. So we've certainly grown a lot. We're international, literally across the globe. Anywhere you can access the internet, you can work with high level athletes. And we used to say it's like an Olympian in your pocket because they're on your phone. It's literally the best in your sport can be your very personal mind power coach. And you can just, get on the phone with them or on the Zoom 20 minutes before you're hopping into your race. It's pretty incredible what we've been able to do, and allowing access to learn from the best in this really, really powerful way.
And I just want to add to that this is something that as a teenager myself, I would have loved to have had this kind of influence, and also someone to talk to, someone to point out things, positive things to improve that maybe nobody else could see, because they can understand you and they've been where you want to be too. And that's the other thing that's very powerful with what we do is, athletes don't have to have a goal to go to the Olympics, but they can have a goal to have achieved something that they want to achieve and be able to reach a goal that they want to reach and know that there's failure along the way. And they're going to have to overcome obstacles and pressures and anxieties and things that a lot of athletes deal with in this point in time. And, last summer we saw it all over the media, and it's very, very prevalent now that athletes need support and they need somebody to talk to. They need help. They need a breath of fresh air sometimes, other than just the pressures that they go through from day to day and in performance. And it's incredibly important. And I this isn't sexy work. Like, when people say like, this isn't easy. Like, this isn't just you click, I dream of Jeannie and you blink your eyes and you feel better the next day. Like Reb said, like, this is a process. This is a lifelong journey. And to be able to start it at a young age is exactly the goal. So that when you do get to the level that you want, or if you don't even do your sport forever and you get to another level of something else, you know how to handle the things better because you've been given the tools to do so. So it's a win-win for everybody all around. And I think it's a supportive place for parents, athletes, coaches, and our coaches, our Rise Mind Power coaches. So it's very special.
Wow. What an amazing conversation, and so much to be learned. And realizing that the Olympics were merely a platform. They were an opportunity for both Caroline and Reb to really step into the mindset development for youth athletes, because Rise and the coaches that are part of it are the leaders in mindset development. So to learn more about Rise and what we're doing, you can visit our website at rise-athletes.com. Click on the word Mind Power at the top, and that will show you all about the one-on-one coaching program. If you want to learn more about our coaches, you can click on Coaches, and it will give you a list of our 35 Mind Power coaches that are part of the program. As always, you can follow us on social. There's a lot of free resources there for you about mindset. And remember, you make an impact in the world. We all do.